PM, and I'll call the committee of the whole to order. Any declaration of interest or general nature thereof, please declare it now. I see no declarations at this point. And number 4 on the agenda is delegations, and we have none. Staff reports, planning report SR-009-23, file number T-2022-003, application for a communications tower, 1492 County Road 32. Oh, sorry, I got ahead of myself. I didn't adopt the agenda. My apologies. Going back. The motion, it's the new year. Apparently, I'm in a hurry. Moved by Councillor Fody, seconded by Councillor Jameson, that the agenda be adopted as circulated. Go ahead.
Thank you, Worship. Is there any advantage to leaving the budget until after we have a discussion about the arena agreement, as that could affect, or will it?
Either way, if we're going ahead with it or defeating it, that would be later in the meeting. We can have the fulsome discussion as it's part of the budget, but
So we'll just leave it?
Just leave it the way it is.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions in regards to the agenda? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? And we're carried. Okay, now we're on to staff reports, planning report number SR-009-23. And the motion is lengthy, so please bear with me. Moved by Councillor Mabey, seconded by Councillor Fody, whereas a consultation process has occurred regarding a proposed communication facility tower at 1492 County Road 32 for Rogers Communications, Inc., represented by Steward Logistics, the agent. And whereas telecommunication facilities are regulated by Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada, formerly Industry Canada, under the Radio Communication Act, which requires proponents to consult with the local land use authorities and follow local protocol concerning location of such facilities. And whereas the township has a consultation protocol described in telecommunication tower and related facilities protocol, the protocol, which includes the council providing comment on the proposed tower. Therefore, be it resolved that council directs staff to submit a letter of concurrence to the agent indicating that the agent has complied with the protocol. And further, the letter shall also indicate that in the event the tower is no longer required by Rogers Communications, Inc., shall remove the tower from the property. Discussion on the motion? Go ahead, Councillor Mabey.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And one thing I noticed during the public meeting, we were talking about this, and there was one note that I made that talks about hydro and fiber connections to be made to the tower. But at this point, there is no, of course, fiber connection out that far in the road, so, or out 32 highway to make a connection. So it was just a question on my part that, you know, obviously it's not there yet. So this is a future plan, I guess, because I first thought when I read it, the fiber isn't there yet. If it was, I'd be connected anyways. Thank you.
Nobody's bitter about this at all. I don't know if we still have Letitia on the line. We could ask in regards to the fiber connection if it's for future use or fiber connect, or is there fiber for that type of infrastructure available that they're going to bring out?
And I guess part of it is their communication tower is all going to be by air at this moment to actually get their communication, not by landline of any sort. And that's where the fiber optic cable would be the advantage.
So we'll ask for some clarification. Letitia, do you have any clarification that you could provide in regards to the reference of fiber in this application?
Through you, Your Worship, no, I would have to go back to Rogers and ask them. I don't want to say anything that is not certain, so I can go back to them and just confirm specifically for this application since it's EORN too, and get clarification on that too. How does it work having internet on an EORN project as well?
Okay, thank you. Any further comments or questions? Councillor Grell?
Just speaking to Councillor Mabey, oftentimes these towers have been referred to as point of access and point of access. So rather than fiber going in that region, the fiber goes to that point of access, and then ISPs can tap into that tower and provide fixed wireless. Those are sort of perhaps what that would mean.
Any further comments or questions? No hands up from the participants? Seeing none, we'll call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? And it's carried. Next item on the agenda is 5.2 Planning Report SR 010 23 application for zoning amendment 713 and 715 Burns Lane. And the motion comes from Councillor Jameson and seconded by Councillor Maybe. That the Committee of the Whole recommends to Council that 1, the application for zoning bylaw amendment file number D14-2022-016 for the properties municipally known as 713 and 715 Burns Lane be approved. And number 2, a bylaw number 07-079 zoning bylaw of the Corporation of the Township of Leeds and the Thousand Islands as amended to be further amended as per Exhibit E, draft bylaw and Schedule A to amend zoning bylaw number 07-079 to report number SR-010-23. And that the Committee of the Whole recommends that Council grant 3 readings and final passage to the amending bylaw. Any discussion on this motion? No comments from council. Are there any questions or comments in regards to the gallery or from the participants? I don't see any hands up, so I will call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? And we're carried. Okay. Next item on the agenda is 5.3 Planning Report SR-011-23 application for zoning amendment 62 Greer Point Lane to rezone waterfront to allow a sun deck on the roof of a new boathouse and increase permitted area and width of a marine facility and reduce side yard setback from the projected property line. And the motion comes from Councillor Fody, seconded by Councillor Jameson, that the Committee of the Whole recommends that council that the application for zoning bylaw amendment file number D14-2022-011 submitted by Aaron Halpern for the property municipally known as 62 Greer Point Lane be approved. And that number 2 bylaw number 07-079 zoning bylaw of the Corporation of the Township of Leeds and the Thousand Islands as amended be further amended as per Exhibit A, draft bylaw and Schedule A to amend zoning bylaw number 07-079 to report number SR-011-23, and that the amending bylaw be presented to council for all 3 readings. Discussion on this motion. Go ahead, Councillor Brown.
Just a couple of small points. I see under analysis in the study, in the last sentence of analysis, it says, following the public meeting held October 11th, the applicant requested that application for amendment also include provisions to permit a temporary shade structure on the roof amenity area. Reading later through the bylaw, which was proposed bylaw, I didn't see anything in there that would allow that. But then the bylaw appears to have been written a little bit earlier in the process, perhaps. So my first question would be, what's the definition of temporary shade structure on a rooftop? And was that allowed? And my other question is, I believe in this report, it says that railings are not included in the total height permitted of the structure. And it struck me as very odd that you wouldn't include railings. So the question would be, is that standard practice in buildings, in building structures, that is not included? But more importantly, was it in any way, shape, or form that some form of temporary shade structure, because that could be a gazebo. Gazebos are very temporary. And that flies in the face of a lot that has been said about rooftop. Thank you.
Go ahead, Madam Planner.
Thank you, through your worship. I apologize. That was an oversight in the report. That sentence should have been deleted. There was discussion earlier in the review of the application. Staff were not supportive of a proposed structure on the roof of the boathouse. And the zoning as recommended is consistent with other proposals that have been recommended to council in that there be no structures permitted on the roof of the boathouse. So temporary shade structure is not defined because it was not supported. And it's not recommended that there be any structures permitted on the rooftop of the boathouse. With respect to your second question, in terms of the railings, the other amendments that have been recommended have exempted the height of the railing. The height of the railing is required under building code specifically. However, in all circumstances, the flat roof boathouses have been less than the 6-meter maximum as permitted in the zoning bylaw, and the railings themselves would not bring the height of the structure over and above.
So that the railing is an exception from the planning of my house, for instance. Is that fair to say?
In this.
If I had a widow walk up there or something.
Yeah, it's a safety feature as opposed to a specific architectural feature. So that exemption is not specifically written into the bylaw for all railings and that type of thing. It's been written in for these particular structures because it's a requirement under the building code for safety.
Any further comments or questions? Go ahead, Councillor Fody.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to the Director of Planning. Further to Councillor Grell's questions, these railings, do they have a height limit? We know they have a height minimum because of safety. Is there a limit? I'm thinking if you put a railing, it doesn't say it can't be solid. And if you put a 15-foot railing on top of your boat and your neighbor is sitting there intending to see the lake, you know, these boat top, recreation areas, they create a lot of questions. We've already seen that, but I would just ask that much clarity. The other piece that confused me on this application, the property appears to me the way it's laid out, and Councillor Lackey might be able to clarify. 62 Greer Point Lane is facing the outlet waters, whereas the boathouse is on the other side of the, I would call it the inlet into the lake of land. Is that true? Like, does the land run through, or is it separate ownership? Property ownership run across through?
I think she's going to pull up the map here so that we have a better idea. Unless you,
Pardon me? Right, but the boathouse lies behind that, does it not? Okay,
That's his boathouse that you see right across from the
well, that is it.
From the boat.
Okay, so the drawing that was provided to me, I must misinterpreted the north versus west layout then. Now, I know the one that I was looking at that, but I misinterpreted one of the printouts that was sent to us then.
Just 1 second. Oh, there
or
we go.
just blowing that up.
Yep. So through your worship, here's the subject property. The boathouse is in this area right here.
Okay.
With respect to your question around the maximum height of the railings, there is no maximum height of the railings included in the bylaw. In most cases, what we have found is that the applicants are putting on the minimum height required under building code, and most of the railings are transparent. However, you are correct in that it's not specifically limited in the zoning bylaw. So if it's council's wish, there could be something put in there to specify a maximum height. But it would have to be in compliance with building code. So that's something that we could look into bringing back to council next week with respect to that information, if that's council's decision.
Follow up, Councillor Fody.
Thank you, Your Worship. It was just a thought. I mean, neighbors being neighbors, if you had a conflict, and it would be very easy just to put up a solid 15-foot wall on that side of the boat, or the top on the deck. That's where I was coming from. So maybe it's something we should consider down the road. The references that you had on right and left there in blue, they were just to show a specific outline of square footage in comparison. Was that the point?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. So this boathouse is currently that size and won't be larger because we all know you're coming into a tight zone there at the outlet. So I don't want to see too much encroachment into that waterway.
The proposed boathouse is 92 square meters.
Right.
The numbers that are shown on this image are to give you an example of other similar scales in the area. So the size of the boathouse and the scale of the boathouse would be limited to what is proposed and what is recommended in the permitted zoning, and shown in the plans attached with the planning justification. So,
There.
yes, sorry, I went past it.
Last question, was there any negative feedback from any of the neighbors or the Charleston Lake Association?
Through your worship, no, there were 12 letters of support submitted at the public meeting, and there were 2 additional letters that were provided today that were distributed to council.
I saw those. Thank you.
Go ahead, Councillor Maybe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, to the planner. The railing typically for building code, they try to stay 42 inches to 36, somewhere in that range. But the other thing that came up here is that a fence typically can't be over 6 feet. So is there allowances for a 6-foot fence to be put onto one of these roofs as a shield, as Councillor Fody may have suggested and Councillor Grell, that which would then cause potential hazard in a high wind, that which we do get periodically around here. So whether there needs to be a provision written in to not allow that type of fence maybe put up on one of these. Thank you.
Go ahead, Madam Planner.
Through your worship, we don't have a fence bylaw. So again, as mentioned by Councillor Fody, staff will look into a suitable provision for council's consideration to be included into the bylaw to limit the height to the maximum height required to comply with building code or something along those lines to ensure that those situations can be addressed.
Okay. Any further comments or questions? I don't have any from council. Are there any comments from the gallery? I don't have any comments from the gallery. I have 2 hands up on the, so I'll go with Joel. And we're just unmuting you, so go ahead in regards to 62 Greer Point Lane.
Hi, good evening. I just have a couple of points, and these are more points at large. With regards to setbacks, I mean, I know that we're in what's being classified as a rural setting. Rural setting for most people means that you're going to have space, open space, and distance between you and your neighbor. May not be defined as such, but the fact that we are classified as rural tells you that you're not in a suburban setting. So you want to make sure that you're not encroaching too greatly on the sidelines of other properties, because that in its own way will equal a loss of privacy, and we all have a right to the quiet enjoyment of our own property. My more specific comment is to the sun deck, and members of council will know that this is a pet peeve of mine with letters that I've sent in and discussions that we've had at other meetings. Sun decks go against the OP in every way. I know that even in the report that was submitted by the planner, they make reference to the fact that since 2019, there's been 5 submissions, 3 have passed, 2 are pending. Again, I brought it up to council that this is a slippery slope that you're going down, and it's setting a dangerous precedent. As much as the planner's report states that there won't be an infringement on privacy of adjacent property, in my humble opinion and my experience having been on some of these types of structures in Muskoka, there is a real and direct impact on neighboring properties. You are now looking down onto properties, you're not looking across properties. Because you're looking down onto properties, the degree of privacy that those properties previously had is now gone. And speaking to Mr. Fody's concern with regards to fencing, if neighbors, and again, council ends up leaving neighbor pitted against neighbor in these situations, which should not happen. Say two neighbors get in an argument and the neighbor with the boathouse throws a 6-foot fence up. Now that's an even greater obstruction than the boathouse itself. So again, in my opinion, and in other residents' opinions, the 3 that have been passed should never have been passed. And I stand by and I strongly encourage council to reject the use of the top of the boathouse. Again, as it goes against the OP and it does directly impact the privacy of surrounding properties.
Thank you, Joel. I'll recognize Chris Lundstrom.
Good evening. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. I wanted to comment on the height. I think when we looked at these marine facility heights, I don't know, I wasn't there. Maybe some of you were there when the maximum height was established. And at the time, I'm sure it was predominantly for pitch roofs or angled roofs. And it was set at a particular height. Right now, it seems that possibility based upon the exemptions that has been allowed for railing is that a flat rooftop could be set at the maximum height of a marine facility in the bylaw and then added 42 inches on top of that. Whether it's a glass railing or not, it is still something that's quite visible from the water. All it does, it gives you an advantage to be able to see through it when you're on it, but everybody has seen them and you can see the reflections, you can see them light reflecting, you can generally see the poles. And I don't think that the intent way back of the maximum height was considering flat rooftops at 16 feet or whatever the maximum height is in the marine facility bylaw. But I think it would be somewhat strange to allow it to actually go up an extra 42 inch from the maximum, which is what's going to happen. I'm not sure why they were exempt, except if it was because one of the ones that were approved in last year might have been higher than that. But I would think that it should be, as any infrastructure, any building component, part of the overall height. And that's all I wanted to comment on.
Thank you, Mr. Lundstrom. Are there any other comments or questions from the gallery? I don't have any comments or questions. Okay. Seeing no other comments, I will call the question. All those in favor of the motion at hand, please signify. 1, 2, 3, 4. And again, opposed. And that's 3 to the nay, so it is carried. Okay. So the next item on the agenda is 5.4. Planning report SR-012-23, application for part lot control, 28 Miller Street, Lansdowne. And the motion reads, moved by Councillor Gorell and Deputy Mayor Olkey that the Committee of the Whole recommends that Council grant 3 readings, final passage of bylaw number 23-007, attached to report number SR-012-23 as Exhibit A, being a bylaw to allow lots 646 and 647 of a registered plan 194 be reconfigured into 2 lots as shown as parts 1 and parts 2 on plan 28R-15637. So this is in regards to the 28 Miller Street. Any comments, questions, queries on this one? No, go ahead, Councillor Foti.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. Just clarification, is this the same applicant that redid the structure that was on the adjoining property?
I think it's a
It was
subsequent order.
stripped, it was stripped down and then rebuilt. They removed the one building next door. Yeah. I just didn't know if it was the same applicant. That's all. I was just curious because, well,
Sorry, Through you, your worship, are you referring to the property further to the south that was in front of council a few meetings ago, or this property in particular? I'm just not certain. There was an application recently to deem 2 lots to the south on Miller Street to consolidate them where an old building was.
Torn down.
Torn down.
The Orange
Right.
Lodge.
Yeah, that's a different property, different applicant.
Okay, all right. It is different applicant. Okay, thank
Yes.
you.
Okay, any further comments or questions? Seeing none, we'll call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? And we're carried. Okay. So the next motion that's coming on the floor is in regards to the budget, moved by Councillor Grell, seconded by Deputy Mayor Olkey, that the committee of the whole recommends that council approve the 2023 proposed operating budget with a net levy of 11,276,000, and that, if only, yeah. And that committee of the whole recommends that council approve the 2023 TLTI portion of the residential property tax rate of 0.00477,906. And that the committee of the whole recommends that council approve the 2023 proposed capital budget in the amount of $7,531,520, $64,932 higher than originally presented. So, Madam Treasurer, if you'd like to come forward to finish our discussion in regards to the budget.
Thanks, through your worship. So just to clarify, so when I received the notification from that we had received more OCIF allocation funding than we had originally budgeted, I took the extra OCIF money to put it into the financial plan. So that allows us, I mean, I've done this, but this is just what I'm proposing. Of course, it's up to council to decide what you choose to do with it. But based on the fact we received additional OCIF money, I was able to reduce the transfers to the capital reserves by 200,000, which reduced the net levy requirement by 200,000. So instead of a 6% increase on our portion, it's a 4.2% increase on our portion. However, we tried to outline a couple alternatives as well in the report. So instead of reducing our transfers to reserves, we could leave the budget where it was and take the additional funds and allocate it to a different project if council chooses to do that.
Okay, so that was outlined on page number, it was 132 of the package. Those were the differences. If we were to leave it at 6% versus, excuse me, to reduce it to 4.2, and below the table is the items that could be done if left at 6%, correct?
There's a couple, sorry, through your worship. Yeah, there's I think I asked the director of operations to put in some wording around projects he thought might be what council might wish to do. So that's what we included. And yeah, so the tables I show what the original budget that we proposed was, and then now what the revised is based on the additional OCIF funding. And there was a change to the capital budget as well that's noted in there based on better information that the chief has on the fire truck.
Fair enough. So I have Councillor Grell, and then I've got Councillor Fody and Councillor Lackey. Okay.
Thank you. Through your worship, I guess to the treasurer. Under alternatives, Kate, it appears to me when I look at the alternative and when it says, talking about specifically the financial requirement for the Kidd Road, it makes, under one of the alternatives, go spend some money on Daria. So implicit in that, it says staff received a cost estimate from Gear Galloway of 238,000 plus, but the budgeted amount in the capital budget presented to us on December 15th has $785,000 in there for this Kidd Road project. So that appears to me to be another opportunity to reduce, because that was transfer. That 700 and some odd thousand was transferred to the capital. It was capital budget money. That's another, there must be a significant amount of money sitting there that could also be reducing the transfer because it's not mentioned what the dollar value is in that last statement, just above financial implications, that paragraph right there. Can we flesh that out tonight? And if we can, I would sure like to hear about it next week, because that's a lot of money somewhere. And I don't know the arithmetic, but that's hundreds of thousands of dollars potentially. And so A, what do we plan to do with that money if we don't use it on Derrya Road? What does it sit in the capital reserve? We could use it to further reduce the levy. Thank you. I go on all night about that one.
But through your worship. So yeah, with any capital project, we don't draw any money from the reserve till the project's done. So if it comes in under budget, the money never comes out of that reserve fund.
But it is, my
but
point was it is in the budget.
Right. So that was the best.
$130,000, but clearly that is incorrect.
Right. It was the best estimate we had when we put that document together, and then Director Holiday found that. So that is a reduction.
I appreciate that, but it also means that everything subsequently, the amount of monies that we're transferring, everything is in air here, or in air. That's the wrong word. Everything is subject to change because of that. And we don't have a clear picture of what's the influence of that on that. I mean, I could do the arithmetic, but the computer could do it faster.
Yep. So through your worship, so I can definitely take another look at that difference and flow it back through the.
What page is in your
Oh,
binder?
I'm sorry. In my binder, in the binder of the
budget.
December 5th, on the budget, under the first page of the capital budget and financial plan, that's page 76. It has the description of the projects. Excuse me. And then moving forward to page number, let's see here.
But you can reference it when.
Sure.
looking at
Okay. It would be, let's look at page 91, although there's another page in there that's,
There's a lot of paper clips
yeah,
there.
yeah. Well, I was trying to be clear. Let me see if I got it. Oh, here it is. How about page 81? 81 says the 2023 proposed budget, that amount of money includes new was $785,000 for the Kidd Road North Bridge. And then, of course, that's added on to $45,000 over the Covey Bridge. And that brings it to page 91, bridges and culverts, $830,000 in the capital budget. Obviously, there's something, maybe a few $100,000 there. And I'd like to know what we're going to do with that money. It doesn't either have to show up in the budget as a transfer or use it for something else, as was proposed in the Derrya Road thing here under an alternative, right?
Yeah.
So it's unclear to me, and I think that needs to be fleshed out, and I will leave it at that.
Okay. So through your worship. So, I mean, the difference between those two numbers, whatever that is, and I'm sorry, I'm tired. I can't do that right now in my head, but is definitely available in terms of it won't be pulled out of the reserve. So like I can update the financial plan right now and email it to all of council. Like it will take me not long to do that. But basically, I guess, and I'm happy to do that for next week. But if council does tonight decide any direction in terms of whether you want other projects actually brought forward or not, like it would help me to incorporate any changes that you might anticipate, or I can bring multiple versions of the financial plan if you want to see different options.
And again, I'm sorry, I'm taking up too much time here. I find it important because it informs every document in this budget, right down to the influence of the percentage influences, the percentage increases, and the transfers, everything. And it all goes to my way of thinking. $114,000 represents 1% of the levy. 114,000. It's quite possible that that's well over 2%, this differential in Derrya Road. And I will say, because it's going to come up, I would prefer that we not proceed with that alternative on Derrya Road. I personally would much prefer that we, as you've suggested, knock 200,000 of that OCIF funding. I'm in favor of knocking that off the levy requirement, as stated. Not take on additional projects in a time when we are pretty free with the dollars and we're accumulating debt. I would prefer we not do that, council members. And in addition, I would like to know very clearly what the influence is on that $830,000 under bridges and culverts by next week. And then, so therefore that would be a deferral of the budget, period. So that's my take on it. I'm sure there are other opinions. Thank you.
Okay, I have Councillor Fody.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to our Director of Finance. On the original proposed budget, you had indicated that for every 100,000, it was $27 and some cents, correct? Okay.
I could check the binder, but
Okay, I just didn't know under the reduction of this new 414,000, whether it would drop down equivalently to maybe $18 or somewhere in that line.
yeah, through your worship. So it was about, if it was $27, it would drop to about $19 based on this. And so if on page, 132 of the entire agenda package, I did calculate based on $100,000 of assessment, what the tax bill would be versus 2022, the original budget that I presented, and then this new budget based on the lower net levy requirement. So you can see the difference there.
That falls in line. My thought falls in line with Councillor Grell's. If we can lower the levy and bring it from $27 per 100,000 down to, well, my math come out at a higher number of 1880 something, but we'll go with 19 for easy round off. If we can bring that down to $19 per 100,000, it still would represent on a $200,000 assessment, less than 75 cents a week increase on a $200,000 assessment. The other thing I don't like about changing newfound money and all of a sudden doing more with it, as Councillor Grell had stated, we're veering off the path of what we initially said we're going to follow 2 years ago or 2.5 years ago, following the asset management plan. The asset management plan lays out, as yourself and the rest of the senior management staff, everything kind of falls in to the cabbage, if you will, and each leaf overlaps appropriately. But the minute somebody tries to pull one of these leaves out and put it where they want it, all of a sudden everything punches. And long story short, Councillor Grell maybe said it best. We have enough expenses for residents this year. They're being pressed from every angle. I don't want to be one of those angles. If we can keep it lower, I would like to see it that way. Thank you.
Okay, I have Councillor Lackey.
Thank you, Worship. And I'm not going to say much more because it's pretty much, those are the questions I had. The two items were the extra for the infrastructure fund and the non-spent from the Kid Road and how we best utilize that money. And I would agree with lowering the levy. And just to add to that, just for some of the people in Lansdowne, I know we can't do much with our water and sewer, although I would like to see us try to be creative in some way, shape, or form. But I got looking through the garbage collection, which affects only those in Lansdowne, as we know. There was an increase in the past. I'm not sure if it came before us, as it's in and out. It's not attached to our budget per se. It's there, but I see it has increased substantially from the last few years. From about 30,000, we're now up to 44, I think 44,000. Now I understand in talking to the treasurer, that was just a bill that was handed to us and told that it was due to COVID protocols. I'm not sure what, was it cleaning supplies, or did we clean the garbage before we put it in the dump? Or it seems like it's that's about almost a 50% increase to on top of our taxes to go to the people who live in Lansdowne. I just wondered if that had gone to tender. If it was just Arbor, you pass that down, there's your bill. So sad. Is there a process that we've missed?
Director?
Thank you, through your worship. That has not gone to tender as of yet. We are looking at all of our waste operations at our waste sites. The collection of the bins right now does not have a contract. The compaction of the waste sites does not have a contract, and the collection within the village does not have a contract. So all of that is part of our work plan for 2023.
Now, is that does that information or that correspondence go out to the people who are paying that bill
Correspondence in terms of,
of what's taking place? Because all they see from the feedback that I've got is that, oh, wow, now all of a sudden I'm paying X amount of dollars more than I did. There was no correspondence to go along with it. Why that was, did it just because the contractor wanted a raise? He got one?
from what I understand, there was not a raise applied to the contractor for an extended period of time, several years. And this was sort of catch up to not having any increases over that period of time. So there has not been a contract for many years. And now we're at the stage where we're trying to address that.
So I guess what I'm saying is we go from 0 to 50 in what, is it 2 years or 1 year?
That was in 1 year.
In 1 year. So we raised what if we raise taxes 50%?
Yeah.
That just doesn't happen.
Through your worship. So it changed in 2020. It was $30,000. In 2021, it did jump up to 42,000. And I think at the time it was communicated to the residents that there had been no increase over several years. So a part of it was related to the fact that I believe the contractor was looking to basically meet the costs of that he was seeing increases in, like fuel and everything else, insurance that everybody else is managing. He's trying to also manage those costs, as well as I think during COVID, he had additional cleaning to his truck and gloves and PPE he was wearing as he collected the garbage.
No, don't get me wrong. I think it's a great service that is being provided. It's just that, again, 50% in 1 year. I get that he's been neglected. Is that his fault? Is that our fault? But you just don't catch up all in 1 year, in my opinion.
Okay. So that, and Councillor Jameson, go ahead.
Well, I'm not surprised we're into this discussion. I'm trying to look at it on a couple of different ways because there's a number of things that sort of moving parts I'm not too clear about, Your Worship. But first and foremost, I'm trying to look at some of the projections that the treasurer provided us looking down some years with respect to some of the burning platforms we might be facing down the road. And the need to get our reserves up was principally what I took away from the original budget. But now we've got a bunch of things that sort of, okay, we want to keep the taxes down, but do we? I mean, the difference between the originally proposed percentage and this is $7 or $8 per 100,000. So if I'm reading it correctly, give or take a couple of bucks. So we're not talking huge money, but then I look at things that really truly bother me. We used to call it the gas tax. The community building fund proposed to be moved out of the road work fund, or it has been used for the roads. And now there's a desire to put it over into the water system. And that serves a very few people. And I'm not sure strategically I'd want to do that, considering that it is a small amount of money against the challenges we face with that water system. So I guess what I should be saying is, welcome to this council. We're the ones that have been handed quite a remarkable challenge because of the asset management program is demonstrating huge challenges. So when I look at this moved for the gas tax, I'm still calling it the gas tax, to go to the water system, I look at the Lou Jeffries contract. That's a big dollar. That's a big dollar, but it isn't really a recreation investment if you analyze it carefully. Then I look at the Duria Road project, which at some point we're going to have to do something because it's almost impassable. And that's my challenge there. But then it starts to become a horse trading discussion. And I'm not sure if that's what we want to get into. So I guess my feeling about it is that I would stay with the percentage, but begin to look practically at what we should really be doing. If we're going to delay major projects that are turning into dangerous situations with which the Darien Road, in my opinion, is coming to that point where it's a danger. And if our goal is just to keep the tax rate down by $6 100,000, well, I'm just not seeing that. But I would like us to consider why we're moving the gas tax to the water system. And I would like us to consider, if we are not going to do major projects like the Darien Road, then let's get the reserves up, because we're going to need them in a couple of years. And if the projections are half right, we're going to need more than what the treasurer is actually allotting. So those are my concerns. They're not conclusions, but they're my concerns. Thank you.
Okay. Further comments in regards to specifics on the budget? Go ahead, Councillor Fody.
Thank you, Your Worship. You may have the answer to this. Has anything changed as far as the province and impact? Are we still going to be working on 16 till they choose to do something about it?
There's some scuttle based on the absence of a piece of information. It's all hearsay at this point, that it would be potentially coming forward next year. It's basically, they're not saying they're not doing it, if that makes sense, a double negative. But at this point, no, there has not been any definitive answer. I'm heading to Roma here in another week and a half, and hoping that somewhere along the way, somebody slips something up and mentions something, because it's obviously, we're not the only municipality with this concern.
Thank you. But, to your words, they're not saying they're not doing it, but action says that they're not going to do something, but action says they're definitely not doing anything.
No,
As far as the results of what we're seeing here.
I think there was a presentation that was made, and I'm not explaining this very well. There was something that they said that sort of intimated that it would be happening next year without saying it was happening next year. I'm surmising from that presentation, and that's the scuttle that I heard, but there is nothing in writing at this point.
Okay.
Okay.
So Councillor Jameson's point, and I can agree with that, but not everybody can, that we stay with the original presentation of 6%. I'm great with that, but there's a lot of people who would not be. But the whole point is we're still working on a 2016 impact assessment. Until the province initiates something, as I mentioned a few meetings back, I had a discussion with impact representatives at our international plowing match. They had their own little booth there. And when asked the question in September, could you still pull this off in 23? And this gentleman's answer was, if we get notification before the end of 22, we could. Well, we're at 23 now, so they're not going to complete it in 23. So now we'd be looking at 24. We wouldn't see any fallout to us or any other municipality till 25.
No, if they were to institute the change at the beginning of 2024, because the interim bills go out in February.
The indication he made to myself was that it would take them the better part of a year to pull it off. He said it's not something that can be done. His very words are, not something can be done in 6 months.
Go ahead.
Anyway, I'll just leave it at that.
But just through your worship. So I've been working with the clerk. We are hoping to have MPAC attend actually a meeting in March, I think. So to present some information and answer questions that we're talking about right now. So.
Okay.
Right.
Well, perhaps the county would have a lot more leverage with the province than we would as an individual municipality. And I know for a fact, without asking, every municipality is waiting for the same answer.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay. So I have Councillor Olkey, then I have Councillor Lackey and Councillor Maybe.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. I'm going to agree with my colleague from the Northlands, Councillor Jameson. It's easy to make straw men out of various projects. I have people screaming at me about, why are we putting money into docks that only a few people use? I have people telling me that we don't need a new fire station. I don't agree with that, but I have people telling me that. You can make a straw man out of anything and disparage it if you want to. 92 families depend on Darien Road. There are 92 residences, either on Darien Road or on their finger lanes that go off of it. I'm willing to bet that the tax money collected from those properties would probably pay for their road over 2 years. That's not how we apportion our income around here, but there's another straw man for you. There is a certain point for short-term pain for long-term gain. Things we defer today will only cost more, much more tomorrow. So there's a point to building reserves and to perhaps doing projects that are necessary as soon as they are necessary. And if memory serves me, we have said that roads are a big issue in this township and that we have a capital deficit in roads, a very profound one. Deferring it on roads as their criticality increases with population development, deferring that probably won't be happy in the long run. Whatever $5 or $7, $12 or $15 we save per tax bill tomorrow. I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Councillor Lackey.
Thank you, Worship. And I'd just like to go back and agree with Councillor Fody and Councillor Grell and maybe look at a hybrid model to save a couple percent as we do, as mentioned, still not know what the county is going to come up with. We have a good idea, but you know, we're talking about now what 5.7 if the county does what comes close to what they predict. I honestly believe we can shave a little off by using some of this quote newfound money. And I don't want to see Daria suffer, but I think there's enough here that we can do a bit of both.
Okay, I have Councillor maybe and then back to Councillor Fody.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So with the asset management plan as instituted by the province of Ontario, it designated that we needed to look at a lot of things and make a long-range plan. And certainly there is a long-range plan here. Do I like seeing a high tax rate on our ratepayers? No. But we have made some concessions here to make sure that we have brought it down from the 6.5, which it started at, and potentially down to 4. So, and in saying that, there are things that come up, and we, just like a couple of years ago, we had Marble Rock as an emergency repair. So we need to make sure that we have enough funds to look after that too. So if we start depleting all of these surplus pockets, are we going to be in a better or worse place? The 4% would be great, I have to admit, as a taxpayer. But we need to really, in Daria Road, I know it well. I've traveled down it many, many times, having relatives on that road. So I do know it very well and how that plays out. We need to really be careful here which way we're going to go. But it's still a lot of great work done by a lot of great people in this office. And we thank you for all of you to do that. And I'll leave it there.
Okay, Councillor Fody.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to draw a little clarity. If we go down to this 4% level or thereabouts, the implication that Daria, I could relate to Sand Bay Road and any other road, the ones we're talking about that are in dire need are all gravel roads. We have 2 road graders sitting right out here in the shed. Their frequency, to my liking, is much less than I would really like. If we get those road graders in a more frequent pattern, we could buy that other year, at least for this year. Thank you.
Okay, I have Councillor Jameson and then back to Councillor Goodrow.
So I'm going to take one more shot at keeping it where it is, and it's, you know, my neck too when I go home. But it's the moving parts, Your Worship, that other moving parts that we're kind of falling over here, in the sense that, yeah, there's a road up in Ward 2 that's pretty bad, and there are other things. And yes, you know, we can talk about the management of it, but we have other people we hired to do that. But maybe it comes down to saying, if you know, if it's just to shave a few bucks off, I think we should leave it at the 6 for personally. And not make decisions about other things. In other words, as we go, for example, I really do not like the idea of the gas tax going to the water system. If we pass the budget, my assumption is that's what's going to happen, Your Worship, and I don't like it because that's really all of us paying for a few. And I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's right. And that used to be in the roads thing, and that's where I think it should be. And then we might be having a different discussion. If we've got some relief on one road and we can use it on another road, well, as the year goes on, staff brings us the recommendations on what we should do with a specific project. And I think that's perfectly reasonable. But in the short term, if we just say, okay, our focus is going to bring the rate down first and foremost, that doesn't necessarily serve the vision we have to have with respect to 4 or 5 years down the road. And I know there's a fire station to pay for and all kinds of other things, but this is the cards we've been dealt. And it's not our fault, but there's been a lot of neglect over many decades, and now we have to deal with it. So if we just want it to be about the taxes, fair enough. Let's lower the taxes. But if it's going to be looking ahead 4 and 5 years, let's pass it at that rate and put some things on the table for further discussion as staff develops reports with respect to what's going to happen with the water system, with respect that should happen with the roads. And let's have some flexibility in that budget to move when the time comes. Thank you.
Mr. CAO, you have a comment?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you. Traditionally, the approval of the budget is the approval for staff to pursue spending the budget and proceeding with the projects that are outlined in it. If the council wants to approve the budget and then hold strings on it for us to come back and get approval to proceed with a particular project, it adds another layer of complication. We often do our procurements at the beginning of the year based on the projects that are mapped out in the budget. If all of a sudden that comes into question, there's an uncertainty now that we won't be, when we go to do our procurements, well, are we going to have council approval to proceed with this project or not? So it adds a layer of complexity. It'll probably add a layer of costs on it as well. So I just want council to be cognizant of that. It also, of course, council will see for our bigger procurements, we always do come back for contract award. So council does have a line of sight of what we are spending under the budget. But the two-tiered approval for budgets, we have a global approval for the budget in principle, and then council's going to approve projects thereunder, unless I'm misunderstanding Councillor Jameson. It really makes things a little more.
So you're not looking, sorry to interrupt, but Councillor Jameson, so you're not looking to have this debate one way or the other after the fact?
There has not been, Your Worship, a robust discussion on at any point, and if I missed it, I apologize, with respect to moving the, I'm still going to call it the gas tax, to a specific other program than where it was before. Strategically, I get why it's been done. And if I was part of the management, I'd probably make that recommendation too. But we're coming to make a decision about that when it has been used for other purposes. Now it's going to be used for a specific other purpose. Fair enough. I'm not arguing with that. I'm just saying that if we're just going to approve it based on a percentage of the budget, we are taking away the flexibility for staff, even if it's just a few dollars per 100,000, to get it down to 4% and we move ahead. There are things here I just don't like. And it's not that I don't want to stop it. I just like to see it handled differently. We're going to pass a budget. Let's assume we pass the budget right now. Then we're going to discuss the Lou Jeffries arena contract.
I was hoping to have the discussion about that in this discussion in regards to and then the arena contract will be either yay or nay, whether we're moving forward or not, because we need to talk about it in the context of the budget.
Okay, but in the context of this budget discussion, it's a terrible contract. It just doesn't serve us at all. It's it's money to keep a building from falling down. It's not a recreation program. And that doesn't make any sense to me at this stage when we've told our staff with respect to the asset management program that they brought forward and give us multi-year projections on the conditions of the building and everything else. And now we just say, okay, we're going to write a check to Gannon Otway for a building that's probably going to fall down within the next 3 years. So, that's where I'm really struggling with some of the detail. It's not to stop staff from doing what they need to do, but I just want to see a little bit more logic in some of the applications before, at the end of the day, something will come back for us to approve if we're moving ahead on the water system or whatever else. And I just want to see us maintain a tax rate going into next year that gives us some flexibility. It's just a few dollars per head. And maybe that's too much, but I think that's really what I'm looking for, is a flexibility in that business plan to really allow staff to move things around if they need to, because we are in difficult times. So I will not speak again. Sorry. Thank you.
I have Deputy Councillor Lackey.
Thank you, Worship. Since you said we're going down this hole, with regards to the recreation agreement, as you well know.
Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Lackey, I apologize. Councillor Grill just reminded me that he was on the list, and it's my apologies. So if I could just stop you there.
And thank you. And my apologies to Councillor Lackey. I just wanted to get back to the overall budget here. And I want to be clear what I'm looking for this week or whenever, before we pass this budget. I would like these numbers reworked so that when I get to page 101 and I look at the estimated tax rate impact over the years spread out, and it has been pointed out and it jumped out at me, I notice like our debt service levels, and I know we're all over the map right here, but our debt service levels, like debt on page 97 is X, but it doesn't seem to show up in our debt servicing. Our debt servicing remains consistent, which clearly after 2028 or whatever, that debt servicing is going to be well over $500,000. So I'm just saying that because I would like to see these numbers reworked, and I'd like to see them in front of me, just as it is in this budget binder, because there are a lot of moving parts here. And I am not prepared to vote in favor of approving this budget as it stands right now until I see the effects on that impact on the operating budget over this 8 or 12 years. That's one area. Secondly, the Derriere Road, if I pronounce that correctly, does it have to be chip sealed? I lived on a road for years and years and years and too many years that didn't get chip sealed. And it was equally bad, and it was graded for years and more gravel was put on it. So do we have to leap ahead and chip seal it? Is there another alternative on that, which hasn't been brought forward? So there's another area I'd like to see another alternative. How many kilometers are required here? Because I remember the costs, 3.7 kilometers, 3.1 kilometers on LaRue Mill Road costs $257,000. And here we're looking at $1 million, was it $1.1 million? So that needs to be fleshed out before we jump into that kettle. LaRue Mills Road costs 200, I'll call it 280, 3.1 kilometers of what we're going to chip seal here. Built the road up 14 inches. So suddenly we're looking at 1.1. I feel really uncomfortable with that number and what we're actually, or what's being proposed. So I couldn't possibly say, yeah, let's go ahead with that. And let's remind ourselves that that was a capital additional request. This whole thing of Derriere Road, it's right there in a list with Derriere Road, Washburn Road, digital signs for Lyndhurst, permanent barriers at Rockport, and the pickleball courts. So it's just another dart in the dartboard. So let's be cautious here and let's try to focus on what the numbers were. The Treasury has put out $200,000. was found money, it should, and I'm not worried about that number. Everyone starts talking about this number of the tax percent increase. I'm just concerned with also those reserve funds, which in the graph under the financial plan is a financial disaster. Right? It doesn't go negative, but it sure as hell goes down to 100. Well, the new number would be 170,000. That should be an alarm bell. We shouldn't be talking about Derryar Road right now. We should be talking about what we're going to do. And what is the effect of the debt on that, on page, the graph on page 101? It seems to have gotten dropped off on, anyway, I'm going on and on.
So
Let's stay focused on this. This cannot be approved tonight. Derryar Road is a spurious argument. And then talking about $19 on so many thousand, that's also a spurious argument. I would like to see, lastly, by next week, I would like to see the cumulative effect of the graph on page. I'm good at picking these things out here. It is the, okay, let's say that it's page, I think it's page 101. If you did the linear algebra and added up those increases, estimated tax rate increase, if you know the 5.8, the 3.8, the 5.0, 2. If you did the linear algebra on that, and I'm not that good at that, but I came up with a number that would bring us to a tax rate for our municipality of 0.006-ish, which would put us in the median. You know, when everyone likes to talk about where we sit in all of the townships, and we're always down here, I would like to see that fleshed out a little better, including the debt servicing for the so-called fire hall that we can't afford the second one. And that would give me a better picture, because that would raise us, if we did the linear algebra on that, and that's an easy one for a computer, that would bring our tax rate up to the median of the townships. And is that our goal? Does it matter? Yeah, I'm just saying, let it just rest here. That would bring us to the median, not the highest, not the lowest, the median. Is it a reasonable goal? I suppose, but I'd still like to see that graph upgraded. I'd like to see the capital and the financial plan upgraded. On December 15th, we spent about 5 minutes talking about this because we had lunch. We had 4 hours in total. We spent on the financial plan. We actually spent about half an hour, maybe, because then we got into the Derryar Roads discussion. So very unsatisfactory overall, and we have to be a little more thoughtful as to the numbers. Thank you.
Okay, so based on, I'll let the treasurer respond to that, and then I have a suggestion.
I just wanted to make sure I understand Councillor Grell's question as it relates to the debt. So the debt that's shown at the page 101, I think that you're looking at.
Yeah.
So when we issue a new debenture and we start a new series of debt payments, that's what's shown here, the incremental change, because then year after year, it's already in the budget. Like there's no impact to the tax rate, right? So.
Okay, then I guess my question is the proposed, excuse me, the guesstimated new fire hall at number 4.
Yeah, so it would be included in those numbers. So the increase in debt payments, that row there, I think it's 190,000, then 297,000. Those are the incremental. Maybe I can show you after the meeting if you have a sec, but those are trying to show the incremental increases. So every time we issue new debt, we're going to increase the operating budget as we repay those debt. But once we included
it is reflected in that?
Yeah, I think it is. I just wanted to make sure I understood your question. But once it's included in the operating budget, the first year, then it's there. So there isn't actually an incremental increase until another debt issuance happens.
Let me just refer back because I can't let that go.
But I mean, I'm happy to pull up the spreadsheet too.
Page 97. Page 97. I don't understand total debt payments. Second line from the bottom. If I follow that across year 2025, it's 488,000 some. And even after it takes until 2031 when I see it's up to actually 775,000. And I take it that's because the debt, the accumulated debt would be not seen until 2031. Therefore, it doesn't show up on the graph or on the chart in page 101 because that stops at 2030.
30, yeah.
Is that fair to say?
Yeah,
Okay, so 2031 is going to be another boomer year.
right. So-
$775,000 in debt servicing. Yowzer.
Well, and 775,000 is showing you the total of those three payments, but in 2031, you're only gonna see a hit to the operating budget of the new payment, right?
The addition to.
Yeah, another 286,000.
Right.
And under current numbers.
I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm just,
No,
I mean, it's
I
the
appreciate- no, no.
incremental amount
Yeah.
I'm trying to capture that will.
And I was just trying to capture the.
Yeah.
numbers. Yeah, no judgment on that. So that is why on page 101, that's why that estimated impact sort of drops off. It's because it doesn't capture the 2031. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think it's a timing difference.
Yes,
If we
okay.
go out further, you
All
would
right.
see that picked up.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so based on this, I know we have to get back to Councillor Lackey, but in light of the questions that have been posed for further clarity, what we could do is defer the approval of the motion to approve the budget to the council meeting. And then we could pursue the further discussion on the Lou Jeffries Arena under the item on the agenda at that point in time. Because that will inform further updates for the treasurer to bring back depending on our decision, if that makes sense. Okay. So I would need a motion to defer to council. So I have Councillor Lackey and Councillor Garrell to defer to council, which is January the 16th.
Question.
Sure.
Does that mean then we defer it? And if we agree, it passes next week, if we agree?
We
Or
would,
do we have to have a special meeting in between or after in order to? Because I mean, at a certain point, we understand we have to let staff move along.
right. So my understanding would be is our hope would be there would be sufficient information, additional information come forward. And there's some scenarios based on your comments that the treasurer can bring forward if that was used for the water or not. If Lou Jeffries agreement goes forward or not, all of that can be brought forward to inform what the percentage would be. But if it was passed at council, it would be 3 readings and final passage. So it would be finalized at council. Okay, and you're satisfied with that, Councillor Jameson?
Concerned, we don't want to tie it up
Oh,
forever.
okay.
That's,
Fair enough.
Or parts, we could approve.
We could approve capital spending as well if we were looking to, if we were having trouble with the operating budget, we could split it up and approve the capital budget so they could tender. So there's, I think we did that in one of the first 2 years. We approved the capital budget. But because there's capital projects in question based on tonight's information or questioning, we're going to push that off till next week so that we can have further discussion. And I'll put the motion for the deferral till January 16th council meeting on the floor. And also just say that if councillors have any other questions, concerns, suggestions that could come forward, they please absolutely get in touch with the staff. And I know a few of you have already discussed a few things with the staff, but just further clarify, for example, you had a number of questions.
And I just want to, Daria Road, just in case we still want to consider it, could we consider, could operations give us any middle road, so to speak?
Director, if
please.
you'd like to speak to this before I put the amendment on.
Thank you
or
through
the
your worship.
deferral.
So I just want to clarify that Dario Road is in the number that I just pulled out of my hat. And that was the costing for a foot of granular B with 6 inches of granular A on top, all of the ditching required, all of the culverts, the surface treatment, the equipment time, the labor, all the costs associated with the 10% contingency on top of that. That's how I came up with $1.1 million. And then divided it in half because the surface granular plus the surface treatment itself is going to cost about $500,000.
So Councillor Jameson?
Just Dairy Road. I thought that had actually gone off the table on the 15th of December. It was on that other list of all kinds of bells and whistles and it being a serious challenge. And my assumption was that we would be taking mitigation measures in the short term. And Councillor Gurel did talk about things that can be done to the road, et cetera, et cetera. But at this stage, I thought the December 15th document laid it out very well with a percentage that made sense for the needs we were going to have to address. And somehow other things have, unless I missed them going through all this, have creeped in to change the discussion. And now we're looking at detail, and I get that part, but I just think we should leave poor old Daria Road alone. It will get taken care of. Probably not in my lifetime, but it will get taken care of.
And
Okay.
if I might, and doing so, what do we do with the money from the Kid Road? We could leave it in the, anyway, that has to be part of the discussion then. If it's not going there, what are we doing with it? Leaving it in we're either leaving it in reserves, I would assume, which is fine by me. That's called savings.
Right. Right. Okay. Your worship, the reason I'm pushing and he's talking to me and I'm talking to him is because now we're trying to manage the place. Okay, we'll move money around from Kid. Maybe we'll do Dairy Road. I didn't even want to do this at all. I just wanted to pass a budget that had a little tougher increase than maybe we were ready for. And now we're moving the rocks around and I just don't get it. So
We didn't invent the options here. We didn't draw that up. It was presented to us. So we're not micromanaging.
So note to staff, don't present options. I'm kidding. So the motion or the motion that's on the floor to defer by Councillor Lackey and Councillor Olkey to the January 16th meeting with further information from the treasurer.
Sure. And after, at some point, if I can just clarify for sure how many options and what options council wants to see, that would be helpful.
Okay, so we won't leave this meeting until we have that for you. I promise.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to call the question on the deferral. All those in favor of the deferral? All those opposed? And it's carried. Okay, so we will have further discussion and we will talk specifics with the treasurer in regards to the questions and the comments that were made tonight, which they would like to see coming forward for modeling. So nobody leaves the room until you talk to the treasurer. Speak now or forever hold your peace. And then the next item on the agenda is 5.6 Corporate Services Report SR-005-23-2023 Water, Wastewater Budgets and Rates. Moved by Deputy Mayor Olkey, seconded by Councillor Gurel, that the Committee of the Whole recommends that Council approve the 2023 water operating budget in the amount of 341,100, and that the Committee of the Whole recommends that Council approve the 2023 wastewater operating budget in the amount of 321,000, and that the Committee of the Whole recommends that Council approve the 2023 water capital budget in the amount of $37,302. That the Committee of the Whole recommends that Council approve the 2023 wastewater capital budget in the amount of 150,000. And that the Committee of the Whole recommends that the Council approve the amendments to the general rates and fees bylaw to reflect the 2023 utility rates in accordance with the Council approved rate study and financial plan. So this motion is now on the floor. Is there further discussion on this, or is this something that you're wishing to have deferred as well, based on the gas tax discussion?
your worship, isn't that a capital
It is capital.
going into the reserve,
but
it's being moved? Is that?
Go ahead.
Through your worship. So just an option, I guess, is like, I did put the federal gas tax in the financial plan for the water wastewater because I'm not sure how we're going to actually balance the water wastewater one. So obviously council can direct me to not do that. We can put it back towards municipally funded asset projects. That's totally at council's discretion. In terms of this actual capital budget, like the federal gas tax is going to go into the federal gas tax reserve fund regardless for 2023, because I'm not spending any of it in 2023. So you could approve this and then you could change. I would have to then update the financial plans for your information, but the financial plans really are just information pieces because they change so often as well, right?
So this is just you're putting the gas tax funding in the long range planning, not in this particular budget.
Right. So for this budget, there's no money coming out of that particular funding stream. So if you wanted to bring it back, in whatever means you want to bring it back, like we could definitely look at that again. It will affect more on the municipal side,
Obviously.
too.
Okay. So that's the reason I asked the question, because I didn't want it to be confused with the approval or non-approval of this. So Councillor Fody, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. The water wastewater issue in Lansdowne to me is like a whack-a-mole. Since I've sat at this table here in the past 4 years, I've never yet been satisfied. The rates are too high. I realize the story that, oh, well, the users have to use it. What are they paying for? We're finding out that when the firefighters hook up to a fire on the main street, they can't sustain the water pressure. So we up the rates again. Now we find out that the tower isn't adequate for much more than 20 more houses in the village. I'm starting to wonder what the residents are paying for. It's a good thing the water itself is good, or we'd all be held accountable, unlike a Walkerton we'd ever want to see again. But as I said, the water wastewater issue in Lansdowne, to me, I would like to freeze the rates at last year's rates until we can tell the residents of this village where we're going with the water and wastewater in this village. All we can tell them right now, we're going this way with cost. Here's your rate. Now, what are you getting more for that? Well, we're not sure. We might have to take that tower down and put up another one. This is ludicrous. I'm not blaming the staff for this. This is a tower that went up 42 or 3 years ago, and in its day was fantastic. Nobody ever dreamt that 42 years later, we'd be paying these kind of rates monthly, annually, and then sit here as a new council and up them again. I'm not happy with this. I'm going to propose we freeze the rates until we can get a direction. I'm not trying to mess up the books of the treasurer, but the minute I do that, I will. But I'm sorry, I can't pitch this to residents anymore in this village that we're going to up rates and have little or no more to show for it. Thank you.
Go ahead, Madam Treasurer.
Through your worship. So freezing the rates, in essence, will likely just decrease what we can put into the reserve. So when we look at the financial plan, which is already pretty bleak, unfortunately, I understand what you're saying, and it is very difficult. I don't even have a good solution for this one on how to balance this financial plan. So if you choose to freeze the rates, basically would just be that much more behind in terms of short on what we need for funding in the financial plan for water sewer.
Follow up, Councillor Fody.
Thank you. I'm going to lay it out where I'm coming from. The city of Prescott had the lowest rates and still do for a large area around here. And they made no bones about it. And the residents were thrilled because I believe the mayor at the time, Mayor Todd, he had requested a little survey be done to vet out some of the people in Prescott that thought their rates were high, only to find out they were pretty much the bottom dwellers of the region, which kudos to the mayor for asking for that report. Then they needed a new water tower. And lo and behold, the province coughed up $5 million for here's your water tower. To me, that just blew all credibility, pardon the pun, out of the water for residents having to pay all the way along for what needs to happen down the road. Prescott did not. The Prescott rates are something like $32 a month. And their rates go up? Nope. The province just said, here's $5 million for your new water tower. And we're taking 200 and some residents in this village and we're wringing their necks out for the future of which we do not know. I mean, we still don't know where we're going to go with this water tower. I have no problem freezing the rates at last year. Quite frankly, I like to freeze them where they were 4.5, 5 years ago. But I'd like to see them froze because the sales pitch is we're increasing it for what? A potential mathematical cost of where it may be come replacement time.
Go ahead.
Through your worship. So I think if I remember correctly, when we brought the rate plan, we went with a 3.5% increase annually, which wasn't actually going to get us to a full cost replacement over the period of time that we were looking at. So, I mean, just in my opinion, the 3.5 right now that we're proposing is probably mostly helping to cover like the increase to insurance, like we have on the municipal side, increase to operating costs. Like when you're looking at the rate of inflation, the 3.5 is probably trying to keep at least level with our operating costs going up every year as everything else does. I'm not sure that the 3.5 is really going to make a huge impact in terms of the full capital funding we're going to need in the years to come, regardless of what you decide on those rates or not. Like it's unfortunately I don't know how we get around it, to be honest. You know, I've worked in another municipality where we had two separate water sewer systems, but the small number of customers on this system is almost impossible. We need better infrastructure to bring in development, but to do that, we need to increase the rates to pay for, like, we're just in a situation where it's like a vicious circle. How do we put the infrastructure in to bring in the development without raising the rates? Because we don't have the money to do it. Like, and maybe grant funding, hopefully, maybe that's an option, but I'm not sure how else we get around it.
Well, that's what I mean. It makes it virtually impossible for a resident here to compare to a resident in Prescott. And yet they both have quality water. And one's paying a quarter of the other, or maybe 20% of. I find it most frustrating. And I can appreciate in your position, being the director of finance, you're doing the best thing you can for our township. And I have full faith in you and your staff to the limit. But I don't have faith in our water system. Not your fault for that. It's just that it seems like every time we go a direction in this village, the water is the crux. And I know the planning department is leaning all over this. They need that water. And I would stand behind that 100%. But hiking the rates to the residents, you know, another jab this year, another jab last year. And yet down the road, the same supposed scenario where the user pays doesn't hold at all. The user did not pay.
I have Councillor Oki or Deputy Mayor Oki, Councillor Lackey, and then Jameson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Maybe I'm not going to ask my question now. Or maybe I will. Are there no government programs for this, since post-Walkerton, these things are pretty much imposed by the province? There must be an appreciation in Queen's Park, thinking strategically, how we can't. This is unmanageable, really, from what you're saying.
Director Holiday, do you, I know that we're still absent of some details before we can investigate possible funding opportunities, but perhaps you can shed a little light on that.
Thank you. We're in the infancy stage of knowing what's required for our water and sanitary system right now at this point. To apply for a grant, we don't even know what we're applying for. We have to complete our environmental assessments and get the recommendations from the professionals in order to be able to move forward. That's where we're at right now. That's the stage. We need to do it with both systems because we're short on both. We don't have the requirements for the fire services with our water storage. We don't have the appropriate water pressures in some of the locations. And then our sanitary, we don't have the capacity at our lagoons for further development, and our pumping station needs to be upsized. That's where we're at to accommodate future growth. So we need to undertake those studies and understand what's required of us before we can apply for a grant.
And understanding what's required of us, you're still going to pay the subscribers.
Okay, so I have Councillor Lackey and then Councillor Jameson.
Thank you, Worship, and through you. I would agree with Councillor Fody to just leave the rate status quo. It sure would have been nice to know this information because it wasn't really all that long ago. We just spent $1 million redoing the water tower, which seems like an awful waste to me, considering it's all for naught if we have to replace it already. When did we do that? 2 years ago? 3 years ago?
It was the first year we were on council.
Yep. So, I mean,
unfortunately, those recommendations came from staff members who are no longer with us at the time. Not to throw anybody under the bus, the information that they had were working with, they gave us the recommendation that they had, right, wrong, or otherwise. I'm not trying to lay blame. We made the decision at the time with the best information that we had. Obviously, it didn't turn out as well as we'd hoped, considering, but even, and I'm not trying to make light of the fact that there was $1 million, it was 963,000 or something that was spent. Honestly, if we had to put a new water system or a wastewater system in, $1 million isn't even close, because the development in Prescott, that 5.2 million, that was 10 years ago or 8 years ago. It's quite a while ago. So you look at what the cost of everything has gone up to redo this system, both on water and wastewater. It's $10 million. I'm spitballing, but or more, 15. See, I'm not even close. Anyways, I'll let the CAO go, and then I'm going to Councillor Jameson.
Just a couple of points. Councillor Fody, you were quoting Prescott is paying $30 or $35 or something. It's according to the Recorder and Times article that was published in April of 2022. Prescott water users will average through the year for 2022, $88.81. So they're not paying nothing, they're paying something. And also the most expensive water and sewer in the area is in the village of Westport, and they were up around $185 a month, just for perspective. One thing with respect to the water wastewater, I understand your concerns in the freezing and all that. It's kicking a can down the road. And as was raised earlier, when we kick things down the road, it just ends up being more expensive. We're following the recommendation under the water wastewater study that was done. The news is not good on the capital stuff for the water wastewater system. Small water systems, as we've been hearing to death, are really expensive to maintain. If council chooses to freeze the water wastewater rates for some other period, the problem's not going to go away. It's not going to magically cure itself. It's still going to be there. It's just going to get bigger. So I understand everybody is getting stretched and times are tough and on and on and on, but these people get fresh water, safe water. They have sanitary system that deals with the black water. I don't have that. I spent a fortune on a septic system, and I would love to be on a water system, but I don't live in the village. So there's some perspective to be had here, I think.
Okay. So I'll let Councillor Fody do a follow-up, and then I'll make a suggestion here.
Just one more point. Neptune put in all these new meters. A number of them were found faulty. So my point is, if we freeze it for 1 year, let's see what the new Neptune meters do as far as a windfall for reality charges to properties that weren't getting them before. Because I highly doubt that the new meters are going to read less than. I think that there's going to be more of an uptake in billing. Am I wrong on that?
Treasurer?
Through your worship. So I honestly can't say for sure. Having worked with the consultant on the rate study, as you may recall, our monthly rates used to include 20 cubic meters of base consumption. That was just given like in the monthly amount. And we actually reduced that to 15 cubic meters because what I understood from the consultant was like even 15 cubic meters a month is pretty high. So it's the thing with utility rates. I mean, we could look at a different rate structure where we have a lower monthly amount, more of a variable amount, but then people will be better at conserving, which is good, like on the one hand, but on the other hand, it's less revenue. So I'm not sure with the meters in place that I wouldn't want to say that for sure we'll see a lot higher revenue because I'm not sure how many users in the village will actually use more than the 15 cubic meters a month.
Okay.
That's me being conservative too, as I usually would be, right? Like, I don't know. It's hard to say.
Councillor Jameson, you have something to add?
Just completely empathetic to the point of view about trying to assist people. But I also believe very strongly in the point of view that it's a system that is working and it's safe and all of that good thing. It has its flaws, but it's working and it's safe. And I agree with the CAO. We're kicking the can down the road. 2 years, we'll be having the same argument. So my big concern, and I'll leave it there, is that it tips over and then the rest of us start to have to pay for it. And I consider that the gas tax moving is kind of the thin edge of the wedge. Now, whether that's reasonable, I don't know, but I'm just saying that I'm concerned because I hear it all the time. We have dead wells, we have failed septics in the other two major villages that Compass Ward 2, and there's no relief, there's no help, there's no program, there's no nothing for those guys. And I worry that suddenly the rest of us are going to have to pay for this. And that is my concern, that it comes to the point where something has to be done. And the next thing you know, we're committing more of reserve money. So I think we should move ahead with the rates as being proposed and everything else. And then maybe that becomes a non-budget discussion. It becomes, a task force or a group that starts to look at this without all the emotion, in my view. Thank you.
Okay. So based on these comments and questions, I'm going to call the question of the motion that's at hand, which is to approve the 2023 water operating budget in the amount of 341,100. That the committee of the whole recommends that council approve the 2023 wastewater operating budget in the amount of 321,000. That the committee of the whole recommends that council approve the 2023 water capital budget in the amount of $37,302. That the committee of the whole recommends that council approve the 2023 wastewater capital budget in the amount of 150,000. That the committee of the whole recommends that council approve the amendments to the general rates and fees bylaw to reflect 2023 utility rates in accordance with the council approved rate study and financial plan. So I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of the motion as presented, please put your hand up. 2, 3, 4, and those opposed? 1, 2, 3. And the motion carries. Okay, we've been at this since 6 o'clock and I apologize. I didn't realize how late it was. So we'll take a 5-minute. Actually, we'll go to till 8:15 and then we'll reconvene at 8:15 to move forward with